Hello and good morning. Welcome to the Asia 2 model of the Austin Sister Cities protocol training. Today we have Dr. Kevin Clark from Austin Community College, who is an expert on international protocol and etiquette, and Dr. Clark will focus on business protocol in Asia. Dr. Clark, I invite you to begin the training.
Well, thank you, Aditi. It's so nice to see everybody here today. What a wonderful way to start sort of our beginning of our weekend on a beautiful sunny Friday morning and to travel around the world a little bit right here online. I can't think of anything better. Uh, yes, this is our second in our Asia series, China and Taiwan. We have two more after this. And I would like to start just a little of my own background. So my doctoral programs are in linguistics and critical and cultural studies. So let's just say that brings in language and brings in culture. But I got to throw in there too that in junior high and high school, I had 6 years of cotillion, which means not what you think, probably. It had its formal dances and that sort of thing, but it basically taught us ways to literally stand a little straighter, to behave a little better so that we could get along with our peers. And that's really what this training is about. I'm just going to start a little bit with what are the reasons for learning business protocol to go to other cultures. So I'm just going to show you a few things here, a few clips. They, oddly enough, seem to involve France quite a bit, but it applies to anywhere we go, including Asia, including China and Taiwan. I think with this in mind, our whole goal here is just a way, how do we get in the door so that we can communicate with other people? So this is not about the content, about what you communicate about when you get there. This is about simply being able to get there and get into the door without feeling awkward. In fact, we're going to see when we see etiquette mentioned here, it's not the awkward kind. It is the kind that helps us to get to know our colleagues and peers a little bit so that we can get down to business. Because ultimately, we're all human. There are just some changes according to culture, cultural studies, according to a little bit of the language, linguistics, and just standing a little bit taller. So let's take a look. This first is a series about John Adams. And Benjamin Franklin was the unofficial ambassador to France. He had even Louis the Sixth, was it Louis the 16th had come to love him. The people of Paris called him Dr. Franklin. But then John Adams comes along, who's going to be later the second president of the U.S. And they meet and they have very different styles. Now, this is in Versailles. This is the King's Palace. And I want you to see in their exchange about how they have different views about getting into the door.
Is it your purpose to destroy everything we've accomplished? To engineer the recall of the fleet under Admiral D'Estaing? Or is this some new kind of diplomatic initiative? The direct insult followed by the petulant whine. What are you thinking of? A good diplomat, Mr. Adams, observes much, acts little, and speaks softly.
The Comte de Vergennes means to keep his hand beneath our chin, to prevent us from drowning, but not to keep our heads above the water.
You learn nothing, Mr. Adams, if you continue to exasperate and antagonize these people.
As I did in Philadelphia, and we declared independence, Your Lordship.
In Philadelphia, we negotiated independence.
Well, you may be as patient and accommodating as you like, Doctor. But for myself, I will not voluntarily put on the chains of France while I am struggling to throw off those of Great Britain.
So there we see, it's quite a stressful situation. So John Adams, you can take a look here as he's leaving. This is exactly what we need to see here. He's dressing like the people of France. He is not evidently American. Whereas Ben Franklin's quite the opposite. He wears a rough-hewn fur hat and a fur coat. He actually had extra hats made and sent across the ocean. It wasn't Amazon, right? It took weeks on a ship to get to him to always stand out as the American in Paris. Okay. Now you see here's what John Adams said. He's not going to put on the chains of France. He is not going to bend to them. In other words, he's not going to bend to his own colleagues there. But Franklin comes along and instead says, the good diplomat observes much, acts little, but speaks softly. So what we see here is that what he's trying to do is to follow the form and style that the French use, not his own style, not his American style. So he appears American, but has the style, as we're going to see, the integrity of a French person. As we look at this, you're going to see, in fact, in this extremely formal environment of Versailles, perhaps the richest and most powerful monarch in European history here, if not Louis XIV, at least maybe second is Louis XVI. But I want you to notice here that as they go to a table, they're not really there to eat for nutrition. They're there to dine. And they're not there to drink, to be inebriated. They're there to toast. And this is common, as we'll see in China and Taiwan in each of our workshops here. So let's take a look at another example. Let's move to the 21st century. And this is a clip from Modern Family. Mitchell's coming from LA. He's alone here in Paris. And I want you to notice his interactions with French people. And it occurs in 3 stages.
Bonjour. Hello.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Sorry. How did you know I speak English?
Have a nice visit.
Excusez-moi. D'où se trouve,
What are you looking for? Mona Lisa? McDonald's? Both are that way. Heads up. The portions here are normal size.
how did you know I'm American? Is my accent that bad? We're dressed the same.
There's no reason to attack me.
Bonjour. 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 Uh-huh. Oh.
Pardon. Excusez-moi.
Ah.
Bonjour. Une table pour un, monsieur? Très bien. Vous me suivez?
As you can see here, he's not actually speaking French. He just sounds like it.
Êtes-vous prêt à commander, monsieur? C'est un choix très judicieux. Merci.
It was easy to fit in. All he had to do was look good and have a lot of attitude. Paris was just like one big gay bar.
Et voilà.
And take a look.
Votre pigeon, monsieur.
Pigeon?
Notre spécialité. Bon appétit.
Ah! No, I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm not French. And I'm not eating that. Okay. This scarf is driving me crazy. Excusez-moi.
Cheeseburgers that way.
Cool, thanks, man.
Okay, so we see Mitchell went through 3 stages here. Notice in the first step, he is obviously an American and has no way to interact. He doesn't have the appearance of a French person or any of the integrity, the culture, the style of a French person. So he stands out. He's not really learning much about the culture, meeting anyone. So he moves to so he's the average non-traveler. We're just separate from other cultures. They're same and other, and I'm same and they're other, and that's the way it is. But if we move to the next step, we see, well, he does decide to look French. He goes in the store. He probably asks for them to dress him as a French person, and he's dressed that way. I thought it looked great. Fits the climate, fits the style in Paris, and he gets in the door. He literally gets in the door of a restaurant. We don't see anybody stopping him or him stopping anyone, and then they're directing him to McDonald's. But he still doesn't know any of the language. This is what John Adams did, or this is a tourist walking down the street that just blends in. Now, I do think there's some value in this too, because when I lived in Belgium, I was told to think of shoes and how you use them. That is, but buy their shoes, not American shoes, because they see they wear Adidas and such, but they see our Nikes and it's more common there. But the main thing is that even if there's a fire, the French walk pretty slowly. So I started to adapt that. And people really thought I was French until I said something. My French got better, and that was fine. And they treat you better, and your French is better, of course. But that can have its benefits, is to look French or to look like any country. And I could say I've got more than a dozen countries down where I passed simply because no one acted any differently around me. The third stage, as you can see here, again, he has no connection to French culture because he's right back to the first step. He looks American and doesn't know any French, admits it, and he's happy to go to a McDonald's. You know, it really wouldn't be that strong a reaction, I think, but he's just another tourist. He's not at home like the non-traveler. He's just another tourist walking down the street. Okay. So here's the problem. Even Polonius in Shakespeare's Hamlet said, basically, if we put it into modern English, clothes make the man. That's appearance. But the problem is appearance is not the same as integrity. He wanted his son Laertes to dress richly and properly so he'd get respect in France. But the problem is that if you assume people are what they wear, then you really don't know about their character, that is their integrity. They haven't bothered with the style and the form of how they act. And Shakespeare notes this is a sort of hypocrisy to value show over substance. So here's what Mitchell could have done. He could have reversed the look. He could have looked American. I would say his style was not quite in keeping in the formality of Parisians. But he could have dressed up a little, even if he looked American, like Ben Franklin did, because Ben Franklin was not just wearing a tunic or something. He really was wearing a fur coat and a fur hat that's rough hewn. But it would help if he'd known a little bit of French language or culture, and that brings in integrity. So with that in mind, then he would have been an ideal traveler like Ben Franklin. With that in mind, let's take a look at a foreign culture. In this case, it is Asia. It's vaguely Asia, vaguely Pan-Asia. It's an unknown, scary world where there's no chance for real interaction. This is one of my favorite clips.
Excuse me, sir. Do you have anything simple, like soup?
What exactly was it they say was stolen?
A sacred rock.
You see, Captain? A rock.
Now this is like a Jack in the Box. Watch the build up. Here it comes. So when people saw this in Indiana Jones, they thought, this is why I don't travel. They are that first step with Mitchell, simply the non-traveler. It's going to be alien. I'm saying they're other, and the two won't mix. Okay. But how about if it is the known world? But the etiquette is scary. This is why people are worried. I'm not going to put, here we see literally my knife and fork in the right place. It's too detailed. And if I'm so worried about how I eat a banana, how am I going to have a conversation with someone who speaks largely the same language in the UK, but I'm worried about the banana? Well, let's see if you haven't figured out how a banana will be eaten here with a knife and fork. You're just about to find out.
Here's how to eat a banana formally. First, you'll need very sharp fruit cutlery like this. Cut each end off and place in the discard section at the top of the plate. Cut along the skin from left to right. Then just cut and eat one bite-sized chunk at a time.
And there you go. I was a little worried there, and he's holding down the banana with the fork and cutting it with a knife. But it is also very British. For Americans, we switch hands. And as you can see, he kept his fork in his left hand, knife in the right hand. So it's already a little different between Americans and British. So that's the odd thing here. That Pan-Asian clip is just extremely alien. Even in time, of course, it goes back to the 40s, but it could be any time in any place in Asia because it's all one melange to some Americans. But here it's a very close world, and yet the etiquette's scary. So I put it in red here. I'm afraid with that, I don't know that I can interact with other people. Okay, but let's mix the two a little bit, the modified etiquette here, so that what is the most quintessentially American thing is a hamburger. And you're going to see this American with this French teacher, this teacher online of French, who is going to let her know that it may be an American food, but it needs to be eaten in an American way.
When the French eat with the American.
Wow, this looks great.
Here's what we all do.
What are you doing?
Eating my burger?
Not with your hands. We're in France. You're embarrassing me.
How else am I supposed to eat it?
You cut it with a fork and knife.
Fine.
Not like that. Don't switch your fork to the right hand.
Oh my god, you French people have so many rules for eating.
The French are very sophisticated. We take dining very seriously.
Can I get the check, please?
So, British, once again, you keep that fork in the left hand, left, right. Okay. Now, this is something that you wouldn't necessarily know. You might see videos like this before a trip, or you watch other people. Let somebody else in front of you in line to show you what you should do. But I found this particularly interesting because a banana may be fairly universal and a very unusual way to eat it for most people. Even fans of William Hanson will say that's going too far. But this is very interesting because instead of somebody watching you try to eat, well, in this case, a giant hamburger, that gets in the way of talk. We talk about the bumps in the road. We don't talk about the smooth road. If she simply had done it the way they did it, she still gets a nice meal. She gets to share that nice meal with her friends or colleagues or partners, and they can get on to the conversation of the day. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. China and Taiwan, we're going to have some fun facts about each in our 4 rhyming areas: greetings, meetings, dining, and refining. We'll see in just a second. And also just a brief focus for each country on its sister city. So let's start with China. I tend to look for the the night views. This one I found particularly interesting. So a few fun facts. Soccer was invented in China 2,200 years ago. It was a leather ball filled with feathers and hair, and it was called Su Chu, which means kicking ball. A second is it only has 1 time zone. As you can see here, there are 5 time zones, but technically it has only 1, and it's Beijing time. So that means that it can be, the sun can rise as late as 10 a.m. because of the way the clock's set. This can be very problematic for Americans and most people traveling to such a large place that would not follow the normal universal time that you see in the band here. You would need that to know when sunset and sunrise are, of course, but the time will be local, which is Beijing time. Very interesting thing here, respect for your seniors, for your ancestors too, is the Elderly Rights Act says it's illegal not to visit for an adult not to visit parents over 60 on a regular basis. So here we are. That's a very nice thing. It also helps in their social care system because if a child is available, it's not just on the state. Oh, good. See, on a flight. This is new. That's really nice. Good. Yeah, and thank you, Joe. So let's take a look at formal greeting. So we're going greeting, meeting, dining, refining. So greeting seems like meaning greeting is the initial contact. You only have 1 chance to make a first impression. That's the greeting. So first of all, there are formal handshakes. So everyone shakes hands with everyone else at the first meeting. So you can't just wave and say hi or hi y'all, howdy y'all. You actually share handshakes with everyone. And so if you had 8 partners and there are 8 sister cities partners, that's of course, that's 64 handshakes. That's going to take a little while. Of course, the order should be the senior or oldest first. It's not always the same thing, and that can be problematic because perhaps the director of a company is younger than someone else, but they get to decide that because who's first in line will be the senior person. Probably age will outweigh position. Okay. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so here's an example of that. Another thing is a group may greet you with applause just before you make a presentation. This is nice. We would think only after a presentation. But these are just little things, and you proceed, and actually maybe it gives you a little boost of confidence. Okay. So let's talk about touch. Now, this is sort of thing studied quite a bit, is haptics or touch, is what is appropriate. As you get to know your Chinese counterpart more, formality may de-escalate to allow some touch, and it could be a pat on the shoulder. In this case, he went around to the other shoulder, but men can only touch there. Now, this is standard in the West as well. Generally, a zone on the body that is appropriate to touch is the shoulder, as long as it's clothed. An unclothed shoulder, no. If a woman is wearing a top, her shoulders are bare, that's a no-no here as well. But it's generally considered an appropriate spot because it is not in a more sensitive area of the body, etc. And in fact, it's exactly the place you touch. Just a little hint here. If you're ever behind somebody having a sign language conversation, so they're deaf or hard of hearing, the way to get their attention is to tap them, and that's exactly where you do it, is on the shoulder. It is somewhat universal, but it works just great because it's something common between Americans and the Chinese. One thing more unique to China is a fist and palm salute. For example, during Chinese New Year, if you happen to be there in February or March in there, and say Happy New Year, men place the left hand over the top and women place the right hand over the top. You see this little boy didn't quite get the palm right here. One way to think of it is that the right hand is considered more powerful, so therefore the fist, and men in a masculine, feminine binary sort of outweigh women. So the power hand is the right hand. That's how you can remember that. So men, right hand, left palm over, and with women, the reverse. We can take a look at this here. Here is someone demonstrating this at New Year's.
新的一年，好事连连，牛气冲天。祝所有的朋友们牛年平平安安，收获满满。
给大家拜年了。
There you go. Sometimes you see the fingers of the palm hand go up a little bit, but it's more of a cusp. It's almost like your one hand is hugging the other. Okay, so let's talk about titles. Not so different than here, but you start with formalities. Here's a way just to get along in life, right? If you have a choice between the formal and less formal, go with the formal. Generally, no one's going to be insulted by that. And if somebody says, no, no, please, to step down in formality. But it's very difficult if you start informal and move up to formality. This is just a general rule in life, but it certainly applies in China as well. You'll note here, you may be introduced as your first and last name, or you might say your given name and your family name, and the title in front if you're Mr., Ms., Doctor, etc. And what you are, your position is very important. You're general manager of American Electric Vehicles. Sometimes you'll hear master or teacher, but it's less common. I think that's sort of the equivalent here now. We see a lot of shows where chef has become a title. It's not really a title. I get called Professor Clark. It is a position. It's not really a title. Usually it means somebody doesn't know what my title is, or it makes it easier for them just to call me professor because they can't remember my name. It's not really a title, but in that case, it's only a title within the organization. So if you were a sous chef, you might call your chef, your head chef, you might call them chef or Chef Jones. But in this case, the full title's out there because you can't start informal and move up. You can only move down. As the old expression goes, you have to start with your ducks in a row before you knock down any ducks. But once the ducks are knocked down, you can't put them back up. And the same for women. There's not quite the same in the US with Ms. If someone is older, even if they're unmarried, they're called Mrs. There's also Dr. Mrs. Olivia Smith. Here's the CEO of Oregon Furniture Manufacturing. We do that a little bit if you think in the US. If a woman is younger, we usually say Miss, regardless of we don't know their marital status. And if they're older, we say Madam. It's gotten more replaced by Madam, though some people would still think it's awkward to call, say, an 18-year-old woman Madam. We probably would drop the D, have the apostrophe though, and say ma'am. So these things vary, But in many Asian cultures, there's still more of this divide, and there's not really an equivalent of Ms. Also, of course, remember that surnames or family names come first and then given names. So if someone is named Zhang Jian here, his Zhang is his last name. So even if you don't know this in, say, Mandarin or Cantonese, they're both, we'll see that in just a second. In China, you could say in English, hello, Mr. Zhang. And later, if he wants, he could say, no, please call me Jen. And you'd say, oh, we return the favor. This is a thing in interpersonal communication. We tend to reciprocate same levels. Someone admits something, we admit something. Someone allows informality, we allow informality. So no, please call me John. Okay, attire. We'll see this tends to be standard across the board for, we're going to see so far, we've seen in Japan and South Korea and now China, and we'll see for Taiwan. Conservative, semi-formal, or business casual attire. Those can be different. When I check with my students when they do speeches and say dress semi-formal, they go, is that a tux? And I'm like, no, that's formal. Semi-formal is a suit, and one level down from that is business casual. Sometimes in summer it may go down a little bit. Slacks or khakis and open neck shirts. Women wear dresses and pantsuits. And avoid heavy makeup and dangling jewelry. You can have jewelry, but lighter jewelry. This is one where we should all watch, because the trend, especially since the pandemic, is a little less formality. For one thing, for the first time in over 100 years, men's lapels and ties have not been changing width. Usually the tie width is about the width of the lapel. But right now, this gentleman is wearing essentially what we are wearing today. So gentlemen, if you are buying ties, you probably won't have to replace them for a while if they're in good shape. And the same with a nicely pressed, dry cleaned and pressed jacket. But I think the trend we're seeing too is a little touch of color, but through a pocket square. It also eliminates the need to get the perfectly balanced and symmetrical tie knot. And instead, it's in a pocket. It's already asymmetrical. I think there may be a trend toward this. In other words, instead of women's suits becoming pantsuits, that are dresses becoming pantsuits, men are actually moving a little bit. It's more androgynous toward what women wear, what this young woman is wearing, which is, well, the collar's out, but is an open shirt. So there's something a little bit in between semi-formal and business. It's getting to us edging into business casual. But the point is, you can always simply look it up, find out what other colleagues are wearing. Here's the point. If you're wearing a tie, for example, and other people aren't, you can take it off. But if they're wearing ties and you're not, there's not much you can do. Gift giving, this one makes people nervous because you do have to wear something. So you think of attire, but you may completely forget about this. What about gifts? But gift giving is an important part of Chinese culture, including business meetings. And at the first meeting, you exchange a modest gift. If you're invited to someone's home, you give it to the host or hostess. It could be things like chocolates or brandy, usually consumables, and they're small. It's not meant to represent wealth. It's simply saying thank you. And by the way, that is certainly still a thing in the US. I mean, I would never go to somebody's house for dinner without bringing something. Usually I have extra bottles of wine ready to go. And people ask, of course, well, what about, because it's alcohol, what if somebody maybe doesn't drink? Well, the alcohol is really is for other guests anyway. That is not something you need to worry about. You give gifts in a sequence of introduction. And because you're visiting from Austin, from the US, you might want to give Western gifts, things that may be harder to come by in China. For example, if it's cigarettes, liquor, desk items, books, etc., they could come from here. And more expensive items for senior level, say the first 1, 2, or 3 senior members. But of course, color matters. You see here, red and gold are always famously popular, but avoid black and white items, which may symbolize tragedy or death. Think the equivalent here, if you gave somebody something wrapped in black wrapping paper or something, That would seem quite out of place. Okay. So a few things, of course, because of the way things sound in Mandarin. The number 4 sounds like the word for death. A green hat bears a phrase that means a man's wife is unfaithful, etc. There's a certain things that you would never know. But if you're buying it somewhere, someone can tell you. You can ask a Chinese partner before you head over and make sure, because every culture has something that would be a little bit out of place to give. Okay, so let's talk about meetings themselves. Now you're in a meeting. Here's a big formal meeting. I believe I see Angela Merkel there. Very formal, but nonetheless, a meeting is a meeting. You'll notice it's no longer standing. It's no longer shaking hands. You're invariably going to be seated, so conversation can proceed. You'll be facing other people. You always want to arrive on time, and sometimes meetings can last even 10 days with delays along the way, with periods of silence. This is tough for Americans. We tend to move fast. Someone will be on their phone on a TV show or movie saying, I'm flying into New York this morning and flying out this afternoon. That's not going to be enough time for your Chinese partners. Even a signed deal, you can't jump on the plane with that signed piece of paper because it's still open to negotiation. You're going to have to slow your pace down and be patient. And that's how you get things done. Okay, let's talk about business cards. This is, of course, in flux. We know there are QR codes. We have electronic sorts of means of exchanging cards, but the trend still seems to be for a very high quality paper business card, usually in more than one color, with the print usually in black and say a colored logo. Very high quality, and in this case, printed in 2 languages. This is pretty good because it used to be business cards were harder to make and they usually weren't printed on both sides. And it's very common now. So this way, someone can read it either way. Now, by the way, first of all, make sure the translation is correct. I'm going to show you when we get to Taiwan, for example, what happens when a non-native English speaker tries to translate. I'd like to point out in the UN, by the way, all the interpretation is done into the interpreter's native language. So if there is someone who's Chinese and someone American in the UN, the Chinese speaker does it for the Chinese listener and the American does it for the English listener. So of course, make sure to give the card with both hands so that the card is facing your recipient, it's facing your partner. They can immediately see that way. And make sure to study it a little bit. Don't just put it away. It looks like it's being dismissive. Look it over, even if you're pretending to look it over, and then put it in a nearby table, etc. One thing that might be a good idea is to use a metal card case. Carry 2, one for your cards and one for the cards you collect, assuming there's not so many in that second one that they won't fit. But that way they stay safe. And if they see you doing that, it shows that you regard their card with utmost importance and care. So that is a good route to go. By the way, this trend, I do believe, is the physical. Print books are still out there. It turns out we as a species just do not like to have everything electronic on our, say, our Kindle or our tablet. So print is there. Now, it may include the QR code. You see here, you could scan it and it may be on your phone, etc. But you'll notice the mix here of Chinese characters and English, writing a picture to remind them who it is, etc. So this is pretty standard. With print and production so highly refined these days, there's not much of a reason not to. It would seem very odd. By the way, generally it's considered tacky to mark out part of your card. If your phone number changed, I'm sorry, you're going to need to get a new card because it looks like your company couldn't afford new cards. Why miss out on a big deal because you couldn't afford an extra $35 printing, right? So be careful about that. Notice here too, we'll talk about it with Taiwan. Be careful when you're in China. We think that Chinese characters are universal. And then of course the spoken language varies, like Cantonese and Mandarin. Now, while most of China does speak Mandarin, in Hong Kong it's Cantonese and South, keep in mind that this can vary because China now uses simplified characters. But in Taiwan and Hong Kong, they use traditional characters. You can kind of tell because there's more strokes in each of the characters. And here's the thing, Taiwan speaks Mandarin and Hong Kong speaks Cantonese. So we've got three different things going on here. Make sure you have it right. Because if you're going to visit both Hong Kong and say Beijing, you're going to need 2 sets of business cards. Don't get them confused. Okay. And of course, if you don't know much, you don't have to fake it like Mitchell did, trying to pretend to say something in French. Hire an interpreter or ask that one be provided in advance. Okay, so let's show an example. I really like this. She shows how we tend to hand off a business card as Americans versus how they do it in China. So if you'll just take a look here.
Hello, I'm Raina. Nice to meet you. In Western culture,
Okay,
it's a
right
norm
hand.
for you to give out your business card with your right hand. However, in Chinese culture, it's different. 谢谢，很高兴认识你。In Chinese culture, you give and receive your business card with both of your hands. And sometimes to show respect, you give a little nod.
There you go. So you see what she did there is she said thank you and takes it, nods. You'll notice that we don't have a video here of both, and I've seen this. It's going to be very awkward to use both hands to both give one and receive one. You might allow that extra 8 seconds or so to do them in sequence than doing them at the same time with 2 cards in your hand. It seems only a cursory sense to the other person that you care about the card. Remember, when you're looking at them, and the nod all means in that moment, no matter how many other colleagues are around, you're showing respect for the one person in front of you. Now, this can be hard to do. You know, there's an old joke about how many conventioneers does it take to screw in a light bulb? And the answer is, it takes, hold on, I see someone I know, you know. No matter how busy it is, we can't see in this nice image here in this video, but you should always treat the person as if they're the only one in the room while you're talking to them. Now, if you'll notice, when you've seen scenes of when Queen Elizabeth II was the Queen of the UK, there's a line of people to meet. It may be 50 people long, but when she greets each person, they're the only person in line, and that is from the monarch. Okay, so now you've had meeting and you're greeting, and there's the dining. And as a comedian once said, it's problematic that we have to use the same hole to speak and to eat. It is true. So it's hard sometimes to coordinate your dining abilities at dining and toasting with talking to colleagues. So if you can get down the basics, you're less stuck thinking about what you're doing. Like when you dance, if you're always looking at your feet, you can't really dance and look at your partner. So dining is often for indirect business without a formal commitment. They want to know what you're about, who you are, and those sort of more personal details. Not personal in the sense of what's personal to you, but that you as a person. Always arrive on time, never early, because if you're early, it's saying I'm showing up because I'm hungry. And remember, you're not there to eat, you're there to die. Come alone or with secretary, but no spouses, because it is a business meeting. Now, if it's at someone's house, that may be different. If they know that you came into town with a spouse, that may be a different thing, but that's what you're invited to do rather than assume. You sit and eat, and you eat after the host has begun at the head of the table. I think traditionally, in a more formal American culture, we did the very same thing. It's rude to eat first because, again, it implies I got to eat, I'm starving. And of course, reciprocate at the end of the visit, invite everyone else out. So let's say it's a Tuesday, you might then invite them out for a Wednesday or a Thursday. This is just standard. First of all, it means each party can host, each party can pay. Okay, so let's talk about toasting now that we've been dining. I consider toasting part of dining, because if you're only toasting, then you're really just drinking. So toasting is always part of dining. It's a big part of any formal gathering. You usually drink after, during or after the first course. Of course, we wouldn't do that. We might have drinks before dinner or after, and it would never go in the middle that way, but it is in China because more time is spent at the table dining. You might use a shot glass for toasting. Ganbai, say bottoms up. That's across China and Taiwan, they say that. And you accept all the drinks from a host, even if it's a thimbleful, because it's a ceremonial amount. Ceremonial. Now you'll see that's quite different. If you go somewhere like Russia, there's quite a lot of vodka before, during, and after the meal, and it is more designed for inebriation. But in China, it's simply something to do ceremonially. That's what the toast is for, right? Again, not to drink, but to toast. If you can't say, give a reason, you can say, I need to drive. I'm the designated driver, etc. You don't have to go into it, but otherwise it just seems like you're refusing to commune with your host. This is saying, I love communing with my host, but I can't actually drink. Okay, so let's just take a look here. There's no better way than to actually show you a little bit of a video on this, if you would. So you are being watched as you drink. So for a job, for a deal, for promotions. Instead of being better than someone, you're saying, no, I'm lower than you. No, I'm lower than you. The same in the US. Bad luck. Not to do it one shot. It's a shot glass, not multiple shot glass. Yeah.
东风吹，战鼓擂，今天喝酒谁怕谁？
女人端一杯，男人哪能推？干了！
Be careful about some of those. Let the other person say it.
老于喝，
耶。
哎，老于来吃啊，自罚3杯啊！老于，
So don't be late.
人家没叫我干啥啊？ 老板明天要出差，我来喝。我年轻，让我锻炼锻炼。
哎，我媳妇儿管得严，不能喝。
Now, I would argue here, that last part, you've heard fake it till you make it. This would be fake it, don't make it, because you're simply not going to be in control if you really are inebriated. You should try to be the least inebriated person in the room. You're in charge of your faculties. Here's the deal. If you are sober, you can appear a little inebriated, but if you're inebriated, you can't appear sober, and everybody's tried it, and every traffic police officer knows about this. You can't really fake that. So I understand these young gentlemen here are having a good time, but it is not a time to let loose. I'm afraid I'm going to suggest that you are a little dishonest and that you just pretend to be more buzzed than you are. Okay, so what about smoking? This is not usually something we have in our workshops here. But smoking is a big part of any informal gathering, Chinese gathering of men, not really women, except a cigarette. But if you don't, just don't say no, thank you. It's the same as refusing a drink. It sounds like I don't want to commune with you. You say, oh, no, thank you. It's better I don't smoke. My doctor says I can't. Now that's different from what this fellow said about he can't go home to his wife drunk, because it makes it sound like he's not in charge of his life. This is saying, I'm not in charge of my health, apart from I can't smoke, and that is a good reason. Okay, how about toasting utensils in order here? We still have, this can be quite confusing when people go, no, I'm going to China, they're going to use chopsticks. Well, of course, but of course, every Chinese restaurant right here in Austin has, use chopsticks. In fact, we're going to see later, people go to Thailand, actually, they don't use chopsticks there. You got to know which country does it. Just because it's Asian, you can't assume. But they're very precise rules. If you refuse something, give it personal, religious, or medical reasons, like I don't eat meat, or my doctor says I can't have any more carbs. Now, again, this is the very careful and polite white lie. You don't have to be honest in this formal setting and say, I'm opposed to consumption of meat or something like that. You can say it, but if you answer a question like my doctor says, and it's about carbs, it's answer the question about why you're not eating something. That's clear. One thing Americans find very difficult to adapt to is that it's okay to slurp and belch soup. To do this, when you've heard this for the first time, you find it a little odd, but when you realize everyone's doing it, that is part of the culture. Of course, put your chopsticks on the table or a chopstick rest when you're done. Some things you never want to do is to leave them sticking up or in some awkward position, some basic dining etiquette. Let's see. Right. You always leave a little bit of, this varies from culture. You got to be careful. In this culture, leave a little bit of food, because if you clear the plate, it looks like you were still hungry and no one fed you further. But if you eat most of it, it says it's delicious and I love being here and communing with my partners. So you want that sweet middle spot of just a little food left, like this was delicious, but you don't have to what we call clean the plate, which is a tradition that comes from the Depression 90 years ago. Okay. Now this is maybe the longest video in here, if you'll just indulge me here, but there's no better way than to see a table, a large table with a large number of dishes with a large number of people. So just have a look, if you will.
I'm working my way through the Chinese lunar solar calendar with all its festivals and celebrations. And where there's a festival, there will always be a meal. As I've been invited to various celebrations, I wanted to start by learning my manners. I've asked Sharon Schweitzer, author of the Multicultural Guide, Access to Asia, to lend a hand. My husband Bosco is joining me, along with two young women we know from back home, Emma and Michaela.
So,
Sharon, we're all looking at that now. What do we do?
Well, as the host, it's my obligation to serve. Provide one of those to you.
Do we self-condiment or do you condiment?
Self-condiment.
Okay.
They're so deliciously looking. Look at that.
The two sets of chopsticks, the one that was in your napkin is for you.
Yes.
The one here is, this extra set is for you to use to help serve the people on your right and left. But you would not use these chopsticks to put in the dish. And you always serve from the Lazy Susan.
So this dish never gets picked up, but you can pick up your dish.
Yes.
Yeah.
So shall we?
Of course. Emma, why did you want to come and learn about the whole etiquette thing?
I'm actually studying here, so I'm going to all these local places, and I don't know what I'm doing. So I just wanted to make sure I'm not embarrassing myself.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. Oh, see, that's so important, because that whole idea of even just who's going to pay is so...
It can get stressful.
It can get totally stressful.
This looks amazing.
So as the host, what are your obligations?
Pour drinks for our guests. We also serve our guests, and we just make sure our guests are comfortable. We also take care of the bill discreetly.
Oh, see, that's a good thing.
What happens is they will take care of the bill out of sight. You shouldn't even see that happen.
Shall we turn it around? Love the leaf.
I do too. Isn't this beautiful?
Wow. So where are you supposed to put your chopsticks when you put them down? Just across the
Across,
plate?
yes.
Okay. Would
Across diagonal.
Would that be rude if they were just kind of on half on the plate?
Leaning? That would not be ideal.
Okay.
The best.
Michaela. Got it.
If they had chopstick rests, would put them there. Since they don't, you want to put them up to the side.
I have a question regarding the taking the photographs of the food.
I would ask the host if it's all right. And most of them are going to be very flattered that you enjoy the food that much.
So am I allowed to take a photo?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
How would the server know who is at the head of the table, who's the host, or head of the table? It might even be a Western term.
The server would know the guest of honors to the right of the host.
Okay.
And the server will know who the host is because they've made the arrangements. And whoever
and this is only
extended the
true.
invitation
She
is
looks to the
the
right
host.
of the host.
And then whoever extending the invitation is paying also.
In Asia, there's no going Dutch. You know, there's no going Dutch
Now
in Asia.
you're talking.
I've noticed that. It's hard to split bills. I actually sort of laughed at when I asked to split a bill with my friend. Yeah.
Oh, well,
Is that
you know
rude?
why? Here's why. Because there's what's called guanxi, or there's reciprocity. So your friend took you out, and you had dinner with your friend. Well, next time it's your turn.
Oh.
So this is our crispy boneless duck. We can wrap it
Nice.
on a pancake, everything together.
Oh, look at how
beautiful they are.
That is gorgeous.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
You know, historically in China, you never used your hands for anything.
Right.
And everything was the chopstick or the spoon.
Yes.
But as we all know, there are modern manners. Once you put the duck in your pancake, you
Then
can
you can-
actually pick it up with your hands.
See, it's looking up for me now.
It's
Now
looking up for you. You're liking that, aren't you?
I'm
It's
liking
because
that.
the duck is in a flatbread.
Now,
That's
what does that mean?
That is
It's
very
essentially a
Now,
sandwich.
as a host, I am going to reach right over there, and I'm going to help him with my communal chopstick.
See, she just saved you.
all of them.
There
Thank
you are. If you can't use chopsticks, don't ask for a fork. You will so entertain your host. If you really struggle and try to use the chopstick, just go ahead and struggle.
Chinese manners trace all the way back to my foodie friend Confucius. Eating etiquette was originally derived from ancient worship rituals and came into practice earlier than any other etiquette system in imperial China.
Oops. Oh, sorry.
It was encouraged by Confucianism because it was said to help rule the country and educate its people. Knowing what to do at table makes it a lot more comfortable to attend a banquet. And I've gotten one of the most coveted invitations of the New Year's season.
There we go. That was quite nice, wasn't it? Now I want you to notice something here. We are at about lunchtime, right? And you see some of this food, it might make you hungry. So one thing to remember, we were talking about toasting when it comes to dining. If you're invited somewhere, I know it seems counterintuitive, but be careful about showing up hungry because your brainstem, your monkey brain is going to bypass any manners, any etiquette that you have because you're determined to get food inside of you. But remember, you're not really eating, you're dining. So I know this seems strange, but have some trail mix or a kind bar or protein bar in your messenger bag or your purse. Have a few bites at least beforehand because that will keep you slowed down. You can think more about what you're doing and you can eat more slowly. That's very hard to do when you're really hungry. So keep in mind here that even watching, say, a 4-minute video or 5-minute video, there's still a procedure here. Of course, it was nice that the server brought things sort of in courses, sort of comes from what can fit on the Lazy Susan and also how much people will eat at one time. You'll note here too, this is a problem. I know more than one person who does not like what we call, I guess, family style. They don't like sharing, but you may have to get over that if you're going to break bread with your partners. Okay, so one last thing about China is how women work in business. This is refinement, and of course, this changes. China is still a male-dominated society, but you include women in negotiating teams. And but you go along without a spouse, because if you are a woman with a man with you, it would seem that the man is in charge, and why are you trying to make this deal? It's pretty simple. You want to avoid smoking and drinking, though Western women can do it if they like. This probably aims more at drinking than smoking, because drinking, it can be more mixed, but smoking tends to be a gathering of men. Okay, good. Now let's look at our sister city here. This is Xishuangbanna. It's located near the border of Laos and Myanmar. It's home to the Dai ethnic group, and it's tropical climate, as you can see here. Here's the Xishuangbanna Tropical Botanical Garden. It's one of the largest plant research centers. That's quite nice. All right, now let's move on, if you would, to Taiwan. Now, I particularly like this section because I was just in Taiwan in March. I visited a friend there who's American. He's from Dallas. He married a Taiwanese woman and lives in Taipei. And we took trains. I went south, went back up, and saw quite a bit in about 10 days and had a really great time. I really loved it there. First of all, a fun fact, and this is my very own video, that rather than leaving trash, you won't see trash on the streets because people bag it themselves. You notice the pink bags. You have to get these from the city. They won't accept it unless it's in this bag. Now, the trucks play a song. It's usually for release, but at Christmas, they'll play Christmas songs. And when you hear the truck, it means to come on out and bring your bags. It's a pretty efficient system, but it also means that they have to be there at a certain time, so so you won't have to wait. But also, if you miss them, then you're out of luck. You won't get that. You'll see people even walking from a block away. There's no traffic in the way. And look, no litter on the street. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? Okay. The second one is the national dish is stinky tofu. It says it's fermented with vegetables and meat. Sometimes it has milk in it as well. And I've got to tell you, I saw it a lot, and it is, for an American, my friend's kind of used to it there, but it is one of the worst things I've ever smelled in my life. It was terrible. But I did watch to see if people bought it, and I got to tell you, most people walk by, and it's hard to tell how popular it is, but there you go. Another one is, of course, as sort of a Pacific island, the Qing dynasty had control of Taiwan for 200 years, and before that, it does have its own indigenous people. There's over 500,000, and there's 26 native languages, 8 tribal groups. One of the biggest, the Hoka, you'll see H-O-K-K-A, you'll see a lot of things that are Hoka influenced. And in fact, the influence extends beyond that, because between 1895 and 1945, it was under Japanese rule. You'll see Shinto shrines, etc. So it's multi-ethnic in its colonization, but also maintains its indigenous cultures. Again, men, dark conservative suits, women, modest dresses, low jewelry, cleanliness and formality, the standard. This is it's westernized, but a very international style. And now there's this kind of unusual combination of handshakes and bows. The Taiwanese value work, friendliness, and respect. It's focused on family, nothing loud and showy. There's a head or a bow slightly for the worst meetings. Now you'll notice here, they're bowing and shaking hands at the same time. This is a true connection, a bridge between Eastern and Western here. It's very interesting. You have brief eye contact because prolonged eye contact can seem aggressive. Now this is a really important one because, for example, when I lived in Europe and came back, I found one thing that I was so used to that I'd forgotten that I had changed, and that is people have longer eye contact. But it makes people uncomfortable in the US, and our eye contact length makes the Taiwanese uncomfortable. It's as if you are aggressive, you're trying to, like a predator, staring them down to win. So the eye contact is brief. Again, all you have to do is just watch other people. Don't be the first one in line. Just see what they do. Also, if you introduce a third person instead of introducing yourself to the host, this, of course, is American. It's something that is still a thing for me. It's traditionally American, if not modern, in a modern way, that the host should introduce the two people that don't know each other. If you introduce yourself, you're basically saying here that your host is being rude. So you sort of wait. You kind of have to wait. If they catch your eye, you might go, oh yes, John, do you know, Jane, so. Okay. Again, formal titles and full names. Never just start with a given name, Mr., Ms., doctor, manager, etc. And it's with the family name, which is the first name, also in Taiwan, like it is in China. And sometimes people will have a Western name. My friend's wife is named Gina. It's not, I don't even know her real name, but she goes by a Western name. And you see here, that means ni hao. He's saying Mr. Phillips and then Mr. Chen. So you can kind of see it in both, a bit of a crossover. But again, this is greeting. This is the very first thing in the room, is how you're dressed, how you look at someone. Do you extend a hand or bow, and that sort of thing. And that sets the tone for any of the rest of the meeting or future meetings. Gifts, again, it's common. You give the gift with both hands, but you don't open in front of the giver. This is something to really keep check of according to the culture, because if someone gave you a gift here and you put it away, we would see that as rude. Like, I don't really care that I got the gift. It does mean you have to feign excitement regardless of what it is. You have to say, this is great, I've been looking for this, etc. Right? But in China, you don't, because it may embarrass the gift giver if it's something you don't particularly need or want. So be careful about that one. You may refuse a gift, but they'll persist until you accept it. So you can refuse it a couple of times if you really want to. And if you exchange, it should be a gift of equal value. Check on that in advance, because there seems to be an imbalance, just as if, say, it were a white elephant exchange at work where somebody brings in a gift that's too expensive compared to the others. It should be equal value because it's symbolic. Okay, now what are some gifts you can bring? Western chocolates, etc. Things that are consumables, souvenirs. That you see multiple things here. They have quite a lot of tea there. I bought tea, I'll show you in a minute, from a woman. She not only grows her own tea, but she dries it, packages it, and sells it. And in her store, she does all of the levels of tea making. You'll notice here, I will just show you at the top of something I bought. This is from the top of Taipei 101. That's the building on there. It used to be the tallest building in the world. And it's kind of interesting. I think it has 101 stories, but it also is the sort of zip code. It's Taipei 101. And they really like their design. They have Chinese style mugs, etc. So this is, for example, what I brought my friend. It was something easy to pack. Say a nice Austin mug. You can only get it in Austin, and that sort of thing, because they use it for tea or coffee, and it reminds your partner every day that they use it of who came to visit, right? That's the advantage of something that's not a consumable. Okay, punctuality is really important. You're going to notice here, Taiwan is kind of sitting right in the middle between the US and China. It's more formal than the US, but less formal than China. I really probably should put mainland culture. I probably should just say China, depending on the terminology. Be on time, but a little late or a little early is okay. I would argue just about anywhere. Early is always better to begin with, because you can sit in a waiting room or a chair somewhere, not in the meeting room, and gather yourself. First of all, plan to be early because maybe you weren't aware of how complicated the subway was, or your taxi or Uber driver got delayed. So better to be early, because remember, people can't really distinguish the difference between heat sweat and flop sweat. They're going to assume your heat sweat is flop sweat. So it's better, even if it means cooling off, checking your appearance in the mirror in the restroom down the hall. So figure out how much in advance, but you can always stand around and then show that if you're late, you're late. You can't do anything about it. Small talk is good, just like in the US. Family, food, and travel, but avoid politics. Don't talk about Taiwan-China relations. And of course, avoid personal questions. Allow the Taiwanese negotiators to introduce you and set up the pace of the meeting. So you don't have to worry about it. They'll do it for you. Again, meetings tend to be more formal in the US, but less formal than China. Let the most senior partner speak first. Don't interrupt. This is something we tend to jump in with each other. It's a Western and particularly American style, but not in Taiwan. You have to get used to. I have the problem with students in my class learning public speaking. There's a beautiful thing called a pause, and a pause is simply the lack of speaking. And they're not used to it because we jump right in with each other in casual conversation, but it's more formal, you don't. You have to learn not to. There's ways to do this, by the way. You can literally bite your tongue a little bit. Other things, little things, if your hands are, say, in your lap or something, have one hand squeeze the first two fingers of your other hand. You can get to little things to remind you not to talk. Okay. Use indirect language and avoid blunt disagreement, and smile. It's to show harmony. Okay, again, business cards. Get a very nicely done. Don't cheap out on it. Or I know it's up to your company, but having a nice logo, a nice printing, even if it means paying someone for the design, because after all, you can continue to use that logo. And of course, have English on one side and Chinese on the other. And remember here, you can't use the same cards you used in China because Taiwan uses traditional characters, not simplified characters. You have to be careful. Now, I learned this because I took a book with me there that it's a nice picture book. It shows objects in everyday life and has it written in Chinese. It has it in Pinyin, the Latinized pronunciation of the words, and then in English. And I thought, well, I used it a little bit, but I just gave it to my friend. He goes, well, it'll help somewhat, but the problem is the characters in it are simplified. That's for mainland, that's for China, not for Taiwan. So you do have to be careful. So if you get cards made, you're going to need 2 sets, because if you are in China, you'll need a different set because of the characters. And, it's one thing if you only had it in English, they go, well, you're an American. But if you're confusing Taiwan with China, that would be insulting. So be very careful about it and make sure you don't confuse them. If there's some way that one card's a little different than the other, so that the Taiwanese get traditional characters and China gets the simplified characters. Again, present and receive with both hands facing out. Don't bend the corners or anything. Make sure to look at it and don't just shove it in your wallet or your pocket. I would suggest a little metal card case. And if you're offering it to various people, you start with the senior person and then move down. They'll be at the front of the line anyway, so that's quite easy. Okay, so I took this picture of some of the streets of Taipei. This is typical. They do the same format, by the way, of Japan. The second floor is written as 2F. The first floor is 1F. They use the system we do. The ground floor is 1. But they actually have it with this Latin thing. It's not second floor, it's just 2F. I want you to notice that traditional characters, the more involved characters, you might say, it's spoken in Taiwan as Mandarin. The same characters, by the way, are spoken in Cantonese in Hong Kong. So the full characters, the traditional, are spoken in parts of China and in Taiwan. You got to be careful. Now, the difference is, by the way, the writing is the same. The language is different. Just like the number 2 could be de or dos in French or Spanish, and 1 and 2 in English. The same symbol for different sounds. As it's explained, they're similar but not close. It's like a duck talking to a chicken or a chicken talking to a duck. Now, if we look at the second one here, this is simplified characters. So this is for visitors from China, and they're likely to speak Mandarin, including from Beijing. Of course, English is always, if there's two languages, the second one will be English because it's international. Because of 50 years of influence, you'll see things almost always in Japanese. And then as sort of a fifth thing here, or third or fourth, depending on how you count it, things are also written in Korean because there's a lot of Korean immigrants, but also a lot of tourists and Koreans in business. Okay, just a few more things here and we'll get to questions. And please feel free to ask along the way. Let's see, good. One of the things you might notice that English is widely spoken, but be aware that translations are often not made by native English speakers. So I took a picture of this where you get the idea, but it's not quite there. Like this very fancy store called My Store, transmit the new ideas, design, and art, as opposed to just transmit new ideas. A non-native speaker probably wouldn't know that, but it stands out to a native speaker. And I found this funny. This was on the back of a chair on one of the high-speed trains. Please note your rear after getting off. So, it means, did you leave anything in your seat? And it can be amusing, but that's the nature of translation. The point is that you have to be careful if you do it in reverse and you learn some Mandarin that you get it right, or just learn less and get less, use fewer words and use it correctly. Okay. Let's see. Here's me with this woman I was near Alishan. It's this very elevated region in about sort of central Taiwan. They grow a lot of tea. And she ran her own tea shop here. On the right there, you can see is a machine that actually air packs the tea in these little containers, but she actually grows her own tea. Now, she didn't really know any English, and my friend knows some Mandarin. So I used a lot of Google Translate, and it was amazing. So I talked to her for 30 minutes about miaozi, which means face. And we kind of have that in English of saving face, but actually you can give face and save face. It's so complex that it takes some amount of conversation. In fact, Google Translate didn't do it correctly, in part because I said, how do you save face? And she said, wash your face every day and use a moisturizer. Right. So the problem is with untranslatable words, which I have a whole project in one of my communication classes, is it can take dozens or 100 words to describe one word. But it's fundamental to Taiwanese life that you don't criticize or confront or embarrass. The idea of a Karen is antithetical to the way the Taiwanese are, because even if you don't like something they've done, it's still, you let them say face. It's not about a dollar sign. It is about their dignity. And we talked at the beginning about integrity, and that's part of the integrity. Okay. As was mentioned in that other about China, Guanxi, it's invest time in rapport, accept social invitations like karaoke, and you maintain it by reciprocating and say, I'll do it next time. Respect favors and introductions, etc. This sort of casual, unspoken but vital philosophy. Okay, dining, pretty similar to China. Toast before and after. Leave some rice in a bowl and food on the plate to show that you're not hungry, because if you do, it says, I licked the platter clean practically, and no one gave me a second or third dish. Leave the chopsticks on the table or chopstick rest, never sticking up. It's a symbol of death or funereal look. Oh, do you like this? Here, apparently someone is toasting some Taiwanese twins. How about that? So when clinking glasses, try to hold your glass slightly lower than the senior persons to show humility. We already saw those young gentlemen trying to out-humble each other. They weren't trying to go higher, they were trying to go lower. Use both hands to hold your glass when toasting someone of higher status or age, not unlike the way you hold your business card. And of course, say ganbai, which means cheers. Okay, just a few more things and we'll get into questions here if you would. Toasting, It can be beer, wine, or spirits. Across Asia, liquors have gotten more and more popular. You may know the brand like Suntory in Japan. Things have changed. Tea is still the most drunk beverage in the world, but Starbucks has blossomed along with independent and other national chains across Asia. Coffee is somewhat supplanting tea, but not for ceremonies, of course, but just for everyday drinking. And so beer, wine, etc. are there, but spirits, that is, so liquors have gotten more popular too. You might have multiple toasts during a meal. Now, we wouldn't do that, of course. We would do one maybe at the beginning, possibly, but mostly at the end of the meal. And never fill your own glass, let someone do it. You're letting someone do you a favor, and you do them a favor. Like the bill we saw talked about in China. I'll pay this time, you pay next time. Okay, and women may generally conduct business. It is a little more equal than it is in China. You have to be patient, though, for businessmen to accept women in business positions, and be invited to business dinners, but not after entertainment. By the way, if you're concerned about that at all, there's a quick fix: is have a business lunch, because it has a beginning and an end. It's in the middle of the day in broad daylight. Dinners, the problem is, when do they end? We know when they begin, but when do they end? And that's a nice way around it. Okay, so let's talk about our sister city in Taiwan is Taichung. It is the second largest city after Taipei. It's got mild climate. It has the National Taichung Theater. And you see here, one of my absolute favorite things, and I told my friend, what do you want to do? If I do one thing, I want to see a night market. I would go crazy right here in Austin if we could have a night market instead of closing everything down at 9 or 10 at night. Well, look at this. It's absolutely wonderful. By the way, bubble tea is a national drink in Taiwan if you've not had bubble tea. Here's an ironic thing, by the way. Soy milk was invented in Taiwan, but I couldn't find it anywhere. They only had dairy milk. So, okay. One last thing before we head on with this. I want to just talk very briefly about why do these cultures form this way? It goes to Japan and South Korea we had last time, and this time with China and Taiwan, and even somewhat next time to a little less so because of its location when we get to India and Thailand. But Gerda Hofstadter was a Dutch researcher. He worked for IBM and realized that the way the company worked was different around the world. So he came up with cultural dimensions, because the cultural underpinning determines how people interact and therefore determines how businesses work. Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you would please just go ahead and put things in the chat line, and we'll have a discussion in just a second, if you would. I just wanted to show you this. We're not going to go through the dimensions really, but I just want to show you two that I think are pretty vital. One is power distance. You see here, low power distance in the West, high power distance in the East. And in particular, it looks like this. This is the Hofstadter actual evaluation site. Out of 100, power distance means, for example, US there is low power distance. Men and women are equal. We tend to call each other by our first names. We're not really into power distances between superiors and underlings. But if you look at China, here, the tall orange category, there is more power in ruling parties, etc. Because of that cultural underpinning, it makes it easier in China to have someone like Xi, who is a very sort of authoritarian leader. But I want you to notice the beauty of this. Notice that Taiwan sits right in the middle. It really is a mix of East and West in that regard. They are therefore a little more casual than the Chinese, but they're more formal than Americans. And one other category is indulgence. Don't worry about these words here. The red means indulgent, and the gray means restrained. Indulgent cultures like the United States believe it's good to be free, following your impulses. Friends are important and life makes sense. That last one is going to be the oddest for us here. But in China, there's a belief that life is hard and duty, not freedom, is the normal state of being. Look at that. Look at that. Taiwan is sitting right in the middle. Now, that's important for us because we know that they are more restrained than us and have more power distance, but not so much as China. So it's close, but to Chinese, it is in the reverse direction. It sits right in the middle. Okay, and that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, questions, comments, suggestions. Thank you for joining us here today. It's my favorite way to spend a lunch hour.
Dr. Clark, thank you so much for the training. As usual, you went deep into the subject and you still made it light enough for everybody to, at least for me, to understand it and, appreciate citizen diplomacy and people-to-people exchange. It's when we do these trainings, it shows us how many ways and subtle ways, I'd say, we can build bridges and in some ways, create peace with the people that we are about to engage with. And I love sharing this information with people outside in the community when we talk about protocol trainings, because it just makes you realize how much we have in common, and also how we can navigate the unfamiliar without fear. And that's really important for us as people in today's world to navigate relationships, be it business, be it personal, be it social, through these kind of trainings. We have about 10 minutes for the Q&A session. And so I'd like to ask our audience here, does anyone have any questions or suggestions or memories or experiences they would like to share today? Or you can even type it in the chat if you are hesitant to raise your hand or go on unmute. I think you may have done such a good job, Dr. Clark, that everyone's like, they're like, oh my God, I've learned so much today.
Well,
no, you always do an excellent job, Dr. Clark. I think, if we don't have questions, what I can do is we can end the training a little bit earlier. And I would encourage our audience to send us questions either on our website or through our social channels if you want to learn more about trainings, or if you have questions about cultural nuances for international programming in the Austin area. Austin Sister Cities has been facilitating these trainings for about 5 years, and it is a citizen diplomacy organization building relationships with cities around the world for over 5 decades. So we are always welcome. We're always happy to welcome your questions and to work with you on community building and international relations. So if we don't have questions, Dr. Clark, I will close the training today, and we look forward to welcoming everybody to our training next week, which, if I understand clearly or correctly, is, I think, India and Thailand.
That is correct. Asia 3.
Asia 3, and we have a huge Indian and Thai culinary influence in Austin. So I'm hoping to have a much larger audience for next week. So I'm looking forward to that training.
You got into culinary.
That would be fun.
Well, half of what we talked about here is about eating. As you know, like China and Taiwan, common greeting is, have you eaten? Yes. Everywhere, absolutely everywhere in Taiwan. If you can walk 50 feet, there's somewhere to eat. Yeah.
I know, like they say, if you have a full stomach, you have a clear mind. So once everyone has eaten, you're good to do business, you're good to fulfill your intention. But thank you so much, everyone, and we will see you next week. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, everyone. See you then.